Yeah, so we're excited to chat here. We're going to have a conversation on kind of brand's purpose and as that relates to the consumer. What I would like to do is we have a large panel here with a lot of different expertise. So we'll go kind of down the line here, and if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, your role, and kind of sharing a little bit about what the purpose of the brand you're working on is.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah Groves. I'm head of corporate brand at MoneyGram. The best part about MoneyGram is that brand purpose is at the core of everything that we do because of who our customer is. We serve first and second generation immigrants, and you may have heard of MoneyGram because we have, from our retail walk-in business, we have about 400,000 locations around the world. And now, though, about 50% of our transactions have become digital. And with that, our purpose is connecting the world's communities, right? That is at our absolute core of what we are doing, and we're doing that now in a digital sense. So I've only been at MoneyGram about 7 months, and the exciting best part about my job is that I'm working on how we are reestablishing our brand in order to tell that new and innovative digital story. And really excited to be here and have this conversation.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Magnuson, and I've got fans. I'm the Senior Director of Social Media Influencers and Partnerships for Northwestern Mutual, which is not based in Dallas, but I am. And Northwestern Mutual has been around for 167 years. We are an old company. When you are a company that is that old, you have to constantly kind of reinvent who you are and what you are to your customers. So we actually went through an exercise just a few years ago to reinvent our brand purpose again. And after lots of research and lots of customer interviews, we were kind of left with 3 main ideas. There was really consensus across all different demographic groups, different customer types, different locations. And it's, first of all, people like money. Shocking, right? People like their finances to be in order. They want to have good finances. They want to know that they're safe and that they can take care of their kids and stuff like that. So what we can offer is very important. But the second thing we learned is that everyone hates doing it. It's scary. It's tedious. It feels like a lot of work. It feels like you might get it wrong. And so people are timid to take that on by themselves. And the third thing that we kind of learned coming out of that exercise is that when you combine those 2 things together, it creates a lot of fear and anxiety for people. And so that is where we landed on our new brand purpose that every single Northwestern Mutual employee and field rep has been trained again on, but it's that we exist to free Americans from financial anxiety.
My name is Noelle Goodman. I'm a brand advertising director at AT&T in downtown Dallas. Largely business to business, do a lot of email and direct mail. And we had a new CMO come in about 4 years ago who's just done an amazing job standing up purpose for us. Ours is connecting people to greater possibilities through simplicity, expertise, and inspiration. And so I think everybody in this room who's attached to their phone certainly knows what it's like to be connected, how important it is to you. You have your connected car, you have your devices at home. And so for us, it's all about making sure we provide you the tools to go out and do whatever it needs to be done in a bigger and better way.
Awesome. I'm Cherice J. Williams, Director of Innovation for Suntory Global Spirits. Show of hands, who knows, I've heard of Suntory Global Spirits? You were lying. We just changed our name. This is a new brand. But no, it was a trick question. We're being Suntory. We literally just had a name change of our parent company about a couple of weeks ago. I'm going with that. We just got a nice, sexy new purpose statement. So I'm going to read that to you. Very elegant. Suntory Global Spirits is guided by our purpose to inspire the brilliance of life by creating rich experiences in harmony with nature. Lovely. But in essence, when you think about our portfolio, right, Maker's Mark, Knob Creek, a host of tequilas, a gin, right? When you think about how they're created, whether it's the grains that go into the whiskey, the wood that we need to put our liquids in, or the agave, right? We care about the planet. And so I was telling Will, planting trees in Japan. I've done that because it really is important for us to ensure that nature is held intact so you guys can have the best spirits. And we're drinking right later after this. Okay, awesome.
Hello, afternoon, everyone. I'm Alejandro with Kimberly-Clark, and I specifically focus on what we call our global intimate care brands. So you may be wondering what that is. Bath tissue and flushable wipes is a format. I think we're probably the last remaining category to evolve into a more elevated space, right? A lot of the categories are still, I would say, held back in talking about, bears and puppies and removal of waste. So my goal in this role has been, how do we elevate? Because clean is a feeling, clean's in a very emotional space, and those that do not have, whether it's proper hygiene or the confidence that comes with that, or even in developing markets that actually don't have access to clean water or a bathroom or proper sanitation. There's just so much we can do in leveraging the power of our brands to bring that forward and make a difference. So that's really been our goal. It's definitely a new journey. It was only about 3 years ago that we did this work and defined our new brand purpose. So it is about creating a world of intimate wellness for all.
Love that. So obviously you can see we have a wealth of talent and expertise here across different verticals and industries. So what I'd like to do is I'll ask a couple of questions to specific people, but then please jump on after that. Whoever wants to respond. So we'll start here. So tell us a little bit about why is it increasingly important to define and communicate a brand purpose, and what role does the consumer or the people you're speaking to have in that?
Yeah, so I think brand purpose really is, why does a brand exist beyond profits? And I think that when you think about that in terms of the customer should be at the heart of your brand purpose and your story. Why do you exist? For them. What are you doing for them as an audience? And so for us at MoneyGram, right, we are serving these first and second generation immigrants who have, left tumultuous times in a lot of cases and come to another country. And the goal is for them to be able to send money home. In a lot of ways, they're sending money home to support their families or, support their community. And so that too is why it is at the heart of what we're doing. And I think too, the big thing is around authenticity, right? So when you talk about the, from the customer experience standpoint, we use really an insights-driven approach of what is happening with our customers, how do we get feedback from our customers, and that is where we're also building our products as a result of our brand purpose to help them in that financial inclusion story.
That's interesting, yes. I want to table authenticity for a second because that's a huge word, and we've heard a lot today, so I definitely want to dig in on that in a second. We'll go to Noelle, taking you out. Same question. Tell us a little bit why is it so important for a brand to be thinking about this purpose, especially as it relates to the consumer?
I would say when we talk about the consumer in particular, that's one audience, but there are many audiences. And we just had a great education from our CMO on this about the fact that it's also your investor community. It is your frontline employees, how you message, even in the case of AT&T, the government agencies that we work for, depends on who you're talking to. And so I think when you take into account all those different audiences, the messaging is different for each one of them. But you're messaging all of them. You're always messaging them. It's not just how you interact; it's how you're talking to them. Where we're going with that?
I guess, what's the role of the consumer in the brand purpose as you're messaging them?
Well, so it's to your point earlier. It's the heart of everything that you do. It's about for us, it's like the signature actions that we are standing up as a company. It's about your frontline rituals when you check someone out at the cash register. So it's messaging, but it's also action. It's not purpose saying, it's purpose doing. It's something that I think is becoming increasingly important. I know for us, one of the things we did, for instance, our purpose is connecting people to greater possibilities. One of I think the most substantial things we've done recently And somebody mentioned it earlier, the sound of silence. We worked with a school, a university up in Washington, D.C., that there are, I guess, students with hearing disabilities. And so what we did was we worked for 2 years on what ended up being a helmet called the AT&T 5G helmet. And what it is it's got a little lens inside that someone who's standing on the sidelines can use their tablet to communicate and play, and let these players be on an equal playing field, pardon the pun, to other colleges. So I think that's a great example of something that is very specific to a particular audience. And I think the real win came when we were able, we buy a ton of, we're the college football sponsor. So then you put that type of message in with that particular audience, and you really, I think, brought it all home in a really beautiful way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Switching gears a little bit, we'll go to Alma. I guess kind of similar question to you. How are you thinking about this when you're building a purpose as it comes to the users you have?
Well, I can walk you through a little bit of how I sold this in. Because 3 years ago, I would say our brand teams and our leadership was not asking for our toilet paper brands to have a purpose necessarily. There was definitely much more focus on the personal care brands. So I had to kind of, take a stance on here's what this means, here's why it's important to brand building. And the key message was this is about future proofing our business. So this is not about philanthropy, great, yes, let's do good things and be responsible. But this is about business results as well. And when you do it well, you are creating those emotional connections with your target, creating that trust. And there was a stat that we looked into recently about, if you think about these brands that have been around for such a long time, like Kleenex, 100-year-old brand, and we are losing penetration with the younger households. And this is a way to drive meaning in that connection. So if you know who your target is and you connect that to your business issue and leverage purpose and be a purpose-driven brand to create those emotional connections, to give meaning, to kind of build those values that you share with your target, then you're more likely to have long-term success. And I think the other stat that was interesting is, as we talked to the target, to the respondent who did research, they are expecting it. This is no longer a choice. They very clearly said, you're a big company, you're a big brand, you need to take a responsibility, both from a sustainability perspective and from a social perspective. So that was one of the big learnings. It's an expectation, and they are looking, whether it's on your website or seeing your actions. And I think the other piece is these consumers that connect with your brands at a more emotional level, they're also more likely to forgive you if you make a misstep. Which, brands are not going to be perfect all the time. And with social media and all the messaging, I think that's a huge benefit as well.
I want to come back to Sarah really quickly. So kind of increased demand for omnichannel experience we've been hearing a lot about, needing to be on a lot of different channels, but picking carefully what the right ones are. In what ways are you communicating this, pretty complex purpose that you kind of spoke about earlier? How are you communicating that to your users in a way that builds brand loyalty?
So I think when it comes to building brand loyalty and trust, I think brand purpose is at the heart of that, and that is both using that word authenticity again, but also consumer values, right? So if your consumer is valuing the same thing that you are as a brand, I think that makes them that much more sticky with your own brand and retaining them as a customer, also showing up in places where they can engage with you in that way. And so just recently, we, Mother's Day is a really huge holiday for remittances because most people are away from where, a lot of people are away from where their mom is. They send money home during that time. And we recently launched, an innovative campaign that was in social to drive, one, brand awareness for us, but also allow our users and customers to be able to build a generative AI card. The promotion was called Make Your Mother's Day. And in this generative AI card, you would put your picture and your mom's picture, and then it would craft like a unique message for then you to share in social media with your mom and wishing her a happy Mother's Day. And that is one reason where we also took it one step further, where these people you would also get entered into a sweepstakes to really bring that purpose all the way home by then sending them to one winner to see their mom in their home country. And this was run from like a global perspective, and we used a pay to own to earn approach, and it was the best Mother's Day that we have had. I think both from PR, driving PR impressions in our own channels, as well as leveraging paid to be able to really connect with our audience and then live out our purpose.
That's awesome. Anybody else want to go before we pick on somebody else? Okay. We'll start, Whitney, move on to you here. How can you ensure, and just kind of going back to authenticity, right? How can you ensure your messages are authentically reflecting your purpose? And I guess what's the risk of not being authentic in your messaging?
The risk is your marketing is bad. I mean, that's the simplest way to explain it. I mean, customers can sniff out inauthenticity, especially in social, so quickly, and they will make you pay for that. Not just in reduced brand choice, but in how they interact with you, how they perceive your brand, what their advocacy for your brand will be like in the future. And so some of the ways that we really try and keep that front and center is that it's baked into a lot of our decision making and a lot of our brief writing. So we have the benefit of an internal creative team, and when we go to write a creative brief, you have to answer the question, how does this help reduce financial anxiety? When we evaluate partnerships, for example, this year we are the official financial planning partner of TED, the TED conferences. And people might think, well, that's different. How does that connect back to financial planning? They're talking about tech mainly. And it's because we really believe in the value of a good talk can change your life. And so the idea that once again, opening up that idea of a talk to people, making it a little less scary, that's just a talk. I can sit through a TED talk, I can go talk to a financial advisor. It helps us to make that decision that that's a partnership that's gonna work for us. So I think just making sure that you're reiterating that you're training your staff on it, and that you're putting it at the center of your decision making, your creative content production is really critical.
Cool. Yeah, and then Alma, we'll come back to you, right? Casey has so many different products, kind of the same question. How do you bring the authenticity through with what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I think authenticity has so many lenses to it. Obviously, you want to be genuine in your messaging. You want to make sure it's connected to what your brand stands for, to your DNA, that it doesn't feel like it's just out of left field, or that you're just doing PR or marketing, that it's a true impact on society or environment or families, whatever the chosen kind of purpose is. But to me, I think it comes down to action and consistency. Because even when we started, the brand team would have support 1 year and do some activity, which was great. But then the next year they had to make choices, and the brand purpose would get cut. That's not authentic. That's not really living your purpose or embedding purpose into who your brand is. So that's been a big push. Like, how do we make sure this is so embedded, so part of the brand DNA that you don't have to make those choices? You're only communicating one thing. It's not a separate program. And then the other piece is action. So with this purpose of intimate wellness for all, we're not only executing in front of pack, we're not only educating and driving the communication and awareness of the issue, but we're also taking action. So in Peru, for example, we actually built bathrooms in certain schools. We're working with municipalities and government to drive advocacy and invest more in good sanitation. We're educating parents and kids about proper toilet and hygiene and washing hands and doing the behavior change work that's necessary. Because we also don't want to come into a situation and put in toilets in a school and feel really good about what we did, and then walk away, and 6 months later, there was no change. So I think action and then measurement to make sure that what you're doing is actually working, and then being able to check and adjust.
Yeah, if I can build on to that, I think unique to perhaps some of these other industries is a lot of our brands, again, I mentioned Makers, Not Great, Jim Beam, we still have the founders and the generations of their legacy still embedded in the business. All of our marketers, most of our marketers go through a course called the Founder's Way. And it's important, in fact, again, the generations, whether it's the grandson, the 8th generation, they're there at the table to talk about their core vision of the brand. So it really is important for us to make sure we stay true to that. Now, again, there is a tension sometimes in ensuring that that brand vision is relevant, 100 years later. And so that is a task upon many of the marketers of my team that are here to ensure that we can connect the dots from the vision, again, like I said, 50, 200 something years ago to today. But I do think, and this is something I talked about in the session earlier, brand relevance really starts from the inside. We don't spend enough time talking about, the cultural competency that we need to have internally so that we're galvanized around the brand's mission and to ensure that is conveyed to the consumer.
Yeah, so you were kind of mentioning, we'll stick with you. You were mentioning how do you stay relevant over the long term, right? Like vision, DNA, these are all things that you need to keep at the forefront while you're running your marketing or you're appealing to all of these different groups, right? How do you do that?
Well, I'm grateful in my current role to be a director of innovation, right? So that at its core is to try to provide new solutions to consumers' unmet needs, right? At the core of any of our businesses. The one thing I do a lot is study trends, foresight, and understand what's coming, especially in our category, which has made a lot of shifts through the pandemic. What we see, which is a benefit for us, is a lot of intentionality. Consumers want to learn more. And frankly, it is a crowded space with spirits, a lot of celebrity brands. But what's coming is consumers saying, hey, I'm going to be a little bit more discerning and understand the core of your business and whether that resonates with my culture or my tribe, my value system. And so I think with our great brands, we have an opportunity to better connect with the consumer, which again is tough right now. There's a lot of celebrity-backed brands who go off of their loyalty or their following. And so again, I think we've had to make some pivots to ensure that we're just not chasing after, celebrity, but really staying true to our core. And through innovation, we're finding ways to listen and observe consumers and provide solutions that, again, meet the needs that are coming.
Very cool. All right, Noelle, I want to come back to you. AT&T. Similar, like AT&T has done a lot, they do a lot. Similar kind of question, how do you take that brand purpose and you make sure it has some staying power, like keeping it in market and resonating with your users and essentially everybody you're trying to reach?
Well, I totally agree with you that it's got to be built into any organization, or maybe it was Alma that said it, that it like literally has to come into every piece of work that you do. Because really, purpose is not an ad campaign, right? So it's always, I think in the future, I feel like we're not going to be marketers, we're going to be brand activation technologists. Like we're trying to figure out like what makes sense and what is meaningful to all these different constituencies. So I think it's going to be kind of easy in a way because you're always going to be taking the pulse. You're trying to. I think you get the best juice when you tie into a cultural moment. Whatever, even if it's a great ad, if you can tie that into something that's happening in their lives, it's got extra staying power. So I don't think it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be challenging, and we're going to be looking all the time at what's new and what's coming. But I don't think it'll be hard. I think it'll be too much good thing to pursue. And we have to narrow the focus probably.
Yeah, I like that. We had talked earlier about kind of the need to evolve with the people you're reaching, and that goes along with that. I know we're kind of out of time, so I want to have 5 minutes. We have time for questions.
We do, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Love this topic, and I definitely believe in it. And I'm very curious on two things. One is if you have stakeholders. All right, so one is the convincing of stakeholders. So if you're estimating an uplift to at least break even with any investment. Okay, so question here, it's like brand marketing. How do you measure or attribute any uplift post-campaign or post the investment that you're making to say that was due to the purpose-driven
activity. So, Alma, yours was really standing out. You're saying they weren't expecting your category to be focused on this because you've got this great purpose, and the statement is very resonant of, the whole world deserves to be clean and have good hygiene. Okay, well, it only matters if you're doing something about it. Okay, you have to be investing in these different efforts. Well, there's a cost to it. Right now, they're not doing anything. There's no cost. And you're saying, well, actually, no, there's going to be an uplift. Here's the estimate. How are you proving that right? That's one question. The other one's a little bit more broad about customer research. We do a lot of that. I always am trying to get the customers to say that this is important in their decision-making process. It's always, every year, at the bottom of the list for what they expect from our brand, from our program. And so I can't have the customer voice helping to validate that for me. I think it's a hypothesis, it's all around. But as a consumer, it is important. And so I'm just curious if any of you have any suggestions of that.
I can share a little bit about how we approached it. So I think first it was, the influencing and convincing part to say the cost of doing nothing and just continuing to sell cases of toilet paper and 3 moves more at once is not a sustainable proposition. Here's where our consumer is headed. Here's where the trends are headed. Wellness and health are top of mind for our consumers. Here's how cleaning plays into that. But even beyond that, we had to get almost a drive confidence and have a successful case study. So I work in global, so I was able to partner with actually my UK team, and we did some work in the UK to identify, what were really the challenges that the UK young households were facing. And it turns out that our team was actually already doing some good work. They were donating toilet paper to the food banks. They were working with one of the colorectal cancer associations to drive more awareness of you should get screened. But it was very disparate kind of acts that didn't really tie back to our strategy. And so I think once we connected all of the pieces and said, hey, our innovation pathway is this, here's where we're headed. We want to become an intimate wellness brand, not just a toileting brand. Here's what the role of purpose could be. Let's do some work to bring these pieces together. We partnered with that hygiene bank, food pantry, and they knew their people best. So we actually placed a quick survey to try to understand a little bit more of the people that were coming in to acquire the food or the toilet paper. What were they facing? What got them there? Just understanding a little bit more. And we quickly pulled a program together and were able to implement it, get some results, and kind of build the confidence over time. We also worked with our Latin America team. They're very quick to act and implement. We changed some packaging, put the program name in front of PAC, our Toilet Board Coalition, building bathrooms saves lives. They went and was able to sell it in as an additional display with retailers. So we were very quick to just take some action and be able to measure it and show that there's business results that could come from this, and then share it, broadly and continue to drive the message.
I'd love to answer specifically on your point about measurement. So breaking it down, I think there's 2 parts. There is your brand, which is who you are, what you do, and what you say. Then you also have that aspect of your reputation, which is how are you perceived. And I think when it comes to how are you perceived, how you measure that is different than your brand tracker. We use something at MoneyGram called RepTrack, which measures 7 core drivers: conduct, citizenship, I believe products and services. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but I know that there are 7. And I would say, especially when it comes to younger generations, citizenship is really important, right? That is how they may interact. I think that has to do with your brand values and how you show up. And then being able to tie those, what I love about RepTrack is you can tie those 7 key drivers to business outcomes. So that includes NPS, the willingness to recommend, benefit of doubt, as well as, which I think is really important about your credibility, that you may have, willingness to trust you in a crisis. A number of those aspects that build on for why you would need an extra measurement to, I guess, I'm losing my train of thought here because it's the end of the day and all I can think about is later.
I can jump on too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say another thing that we look at too on that same kind of brand health
view is with Kantar, we have a question about both aided and unaided on what financial brands help to relieve financial anxiety. So we're directly tracking our purpose in our quarterly Kantar. And then we can see what we hope, of course, is that we start coming up more and more and more in the unaided, because that's when we know that we're really making a strong push. But it does help at least to see on a campaign by campaign or quarterly activity basis where are we making gains. And then we can also slice that demographically for key initiatives as well.
Just to add to that, I think the best form of success is when you don't have to market. The consumer calls for your brand. And especially in my space of spirits, is where we have, again, celebrities or events or partnerships that are like, I want that. We didn't have to do the work. And I think that's because we're connected to the core, their value system, and ultimately that is, again, success for us in the spirit space.
There's a tremendous amount of intelligence on the stage. Ask questions. Come on, there must be more questions.
I'm a question girl. So this is for Cherice. In terms of being in front of the trends, right now, non-alcoholic, big trend, right? And I think the spirits industry has started to toe in. I don't know much about it, but how important is that to Suntory and any new products coming out, or are there ones that exist?
I can't tell you about new stuff. That's what we're working on. But one of the reasons of our name change to Suntory Global Spirits is Suntory is actually a global brand. And again, I've had a chance to experience our brand in Japan and Australia. And to your point, they've done a lot of great work in non-alc overseas. And the U.S. is starting to, sometimes the U.S. is a little slower than other parts of the world and picking up on some trends. Non-alc is really important for us. I would tell you it's, as someone who has worked on work streams for non-alc and low, sometimes it's a challenge internally because we love our spirits, and so I think we have to figure out what's the right format, what's the right occasion, and what's the right proposition. I'll be honest, there's been discussion, should Jim Beam be a non-alc? No, I don't think that makes sense, right? But what is the right way that we can authentically go into that space with the right brands? So it is very much top of mind. But not just coming out with a product that is non-alc, but also moderation and how you consume. And I think that's something you'll see from us. It's always been there, how we drink responsibly and portion control. And so what you see from many of our brands, including a plug for the brand I'm working on the rocks, which is pre-made cocktails. We're trying to find ways to help you understand how to consume it in a responsible way. But more stuff coming, by the way.
This is a great panel, and this question is for Ms. Williams, but any of the women on the panel can address this. I like what you talked about having to work with founders of spirits that reach generations. And as a young boomer who's a big bourbon snob, what I didn't hear today is how to reach boomers all the way down to Gen Alpha, but with spirits, right? It's boomers, X, millennials. Can you talk a little bit about how you deal not just with the generations of the founders of the brands, but with consumers from their 70s all the way into their late 20s?
It's a great question. Are you a fan of Maker's Mark?
I am a big fan of Maker's.
Awesome. I worked on that brand for a couple of years. And the core of how Maker's was founded, not to go too deep because I can be a nerd in this as well, is it was really about breaking the mold. When you think about Maker's, it's actually created differently than most bourbons and whiskeys, right? And so that message of breaking the mold, we've tried to carry that through different generations. What does that mean for generations, but not just from an age perspective, from a race perspective? What does that mean? And so it's not easy sometimes, because again, we still have the grandson at the helm of the brand, and trying to navigate particular messaging and make sure he's resonating with it is still the core of what his grandfather meant it to be, but trying to translate that. Most people don't realize that Margie Samuels, which is the woman, the grandmother, if you will, of the founder or the leader of the brand right now. She's a woman innovator back in the day, which is very novel. And so how do we tap into women these days and say, talk about, women in whiskey, but also like women innovators and how we break through the mold within our respective fields. So it's a positioning work. It's very tough work, but that is our goal because to your point, we have so many generations that are drinking our products, and how do we make sure we stay relevant is a part of all our jobs.
I'd love to add to that too. Just when you think about purpose, I think your purpose has to be broad enough that it can adjust to every generation. And so when we think about financial anxiety, what your financial anxiety probably is as someone that's nearing retirement is very, very different than what it likely is if you are freshly out of college and thinking about student debt and am I ever going to make enough to buy a house versus is my 401k going to be enough to sustain me during my retirement? Is inflation going to be under control? Those anxieties are very different. And so while the purpose remains the same, how we speak to that purpose changes with different audiences and their specific needs.
I mean, pretty much you just said the purpose is inclusion in different ways, right? So like all of your brands have the ability to appeal to so many different folks, and to make them feel welcome, should they want to be. Sometimes that can go wrong in certain ways, right? I'm curious if there's certain examples you've seen where it hasn't gone as anticipated or something that's happened.
Well, I can say that in an attempt to be super inclusive, I think that brands also have to remember what it is that they're doing as a brand to show up for those different audiences. So, for example, in social, I will inevitably get about 18 different requests a year to support different D&I holidays with social media messages. But Northwestern Mutual, while we are a very inclusive brand, we only have programs that are supporting some of those in meaningful ways and committing dollars and talent and resources to making meaningful change for certain communities. So if we don't have the backing to, say that yes, we're actively supporting a certain community, then we're not going to say, happy whatever month or whatever on our social channels because we have not earned the right to speak in that month. So inclusion is something that you can aspire to, but you also have to earn it. That's what I would say.
There may be an external example, because as we were going to talk about this topic, I was kind of brushing up on my case studies as well, and one of the ones that just comes to mind is Airbnb and how they handle some of the backlash, because they're all about belonging. Anyone can belong anywhere. And one of the examples that was in the case studies called Project Lighthouse was they got some feedback that, especially from the Black community, they were being rejected as they tried to book, right? And they could have said, oh, let's just social media or input, but they took it very seriously and dug into it. They created their own committee. They published a report, which the findings were that was happening. So I think that piece around transparency and taking action and being responsible with what your findings are is a critical component. I think for our brands, we're not there yet. We've only been executing for about 1.5 years since the work, but that was a lot of the discussion we had, when we're executing this is a big decision, it's a big commitment. What if? Do we need to have an action team in place, a response component? What if we need to act quickly? Who's the decision maker? Those things need to be in place when it comes to the decisions on purpose, because not everybody's going to love your purpose.
Just to build on that, and just again, we're all marketers in a room. Sometimes we can make silly decisions. And I harken back to a campaign for our brand Hornitos, which again has founders embedded in that brand. And one of the campaigns that was on the table, we did not launch it, was Grab Life by the Hornitos. It's just silly, right? We get where you were going, but that doesn't make sense for the intent of the founders and the brand. And so again, sometimes it's great to have, again, for us, founders or the generations, the legacy, a part of decision making because it can help us kind of like get back in order. Because again, I get the intent, grab like, oh, I grab like, doesn't make sense.
Any other smart questions? Yes.
Well, it's pressure. This is kind of an opinion one, but it seems like a lot of times companies use their purpose and inclusion when they need to make an apology for a goof. What's y'all's opinions on how a lot of times people handle that? Is it helpful or hurtful to what y'all are trying to do?
I know when we had a recent data breach, I guess a month and a half ago, they actually, when they were making decisions on what they wanted to do, they literally went back to the purpose, structure and said, what does this call for us to go do? So they use it as a fact checker on ourselves to make sure that we're always keeping that in mind and always behaving in a way that aligns to it. So it's a tool for us in many ways.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, it's also taking it to your own values, right? And making sure that if you are publishing like a crisis comms, if you do have something that goes wrong, that you are adhering to those values and that you see those same values or your audience can see them in your brand, or you're meeting them in the same place. I mean, look, you asked the question around like what clubs were there. Everybody watched what happened with Bud Light, right? Like just a couple, and maybe it was only really a year ago, right? And I think with that, it's how do we make sure that we're not, that your brand isn't the next Bud Light because things take off so quickly in social. The Bumble example that was from earlier, I think Airbnb with safety. They're inevitably happening more and more with brands. And so I think that the faster also I think that your response time can be is really important. It's not just, so the point of how do you get the right people together in a quick, meaningful way to start to make those decisions, I think then will help you get to a better output.
Any final questions? All right, let's give it up for, oh, yes, sorry.
I wasn't gonna ask it, So, I heard a couple times, genuine authenticity, making sure the external matches the internal. And this has been solely focused on consumers, but I'm curious on that external part. Do you find that the purposes and inclusion is helping to align with the employees that you're working with, or drawing people that are aligned with that purpose to help you meet those needs? And are those intentions aligned with the outcomes that you're getting from the external?
So I will share a recent example, and of a goof, actually, to the last question too. So our social team recently had been kind of remaking existing memes. I'm sure you guys have all seen the meme with the guy at the table and says, "Change my mind," right? We put out kind of a Northwestern Mutual version of that, and very quickly in our company Slack for the LGBTQ ERG, they said, hey, we know you recast the guy, and it's not the same guy, but that meme format is actually this person who said some really racist, homophobic stuff. And did you think about your LGBTQ employees when that happened? That post was down within 5 minutes of that Slack going out. And so I think it's letting your employees know their purpose so that they feel confident in speaking out and giving you that feedback. Because that was not, the team that created it, they weren't aware of the history of it, there's a lot of reason behind it, but when someone was able to say, hey, are we sure this matches our purpose? It doesn't matter that came from outside of marketing or outside of the social team to make that comment. We were able to say, does this meet our purpose? No, it doesn't, it's gone.
I'll add one more thing. I do a lot of direct mail and email, which has a ton of legal in it. And so our team is constantly being, we're highly monitored, group of technology company. But when we get so much legal, we always ask ourselves, we're supposed to be going after simplicity, expertise, and inspiration. So I always say, wait a minute, how can we have this much legal and we're supposed to be simple? Now we have not won that battle yet, but it's a tool again that we as employees can use to go, wait a minute, everybody tells us what we're supposed to be doing. What about this? So it kind of gives a little extra backbone to some of those arguments. I would say, I don't know if that answers the question, but along the same line.
Just a quick build. So, part of the work we've been doing, we wanted to also be very credible and bring in the right experts because sanitation is a big global issue. It's actually part of the UN SDGs. So
we founded what we call the Toilet Board Coalition. And we actually partner with another company called Unilever, Lixol, and kind of experts from that space. And one of the things we do is actually mentor sanitation entrepreneurs. So that was like the perfect avenue to get our employees involved. So twice a year we offer for all of our employees who are interested and have a passion for purpose and influencing others and kind of sharing their functional gifts to mentor these sanitation entrepreneurs. And they're typically in India, in Africa, in places where you may not have the access to experts in marketing, experts in building an app, to give you feedback or how to create a business plan. And it has created so much positive community within the company, because it's like the companies give you permission and telling you, like, go share this. Like, it's okay to do it within your work hours. It's part of your passion and your personal purpose, and that has driven a lot of passion amongst the team. I also just wanted to add, like, when we do recruiting, new people coming out of MBA, one of the main questions I always get is, what are your brands doing to drive sustainability and social mission? Every time. So new employees that we're attracting into the company care about that. So I think the more we do across our brands, it's just, you're going to get better talent.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right, let's give it up for a final.